The air in the penthouse suite overlooking Seattle's Elliott Bay was thick with the cloying scent of lilies and greed. Genevieve Dubois, the matriarch of a forgotten dynasty, lay propped against a mountain of silk pillows, her breath a shallow whisper against the oppressive silence. Her eyes, once the color of warm cognac, were now clouded, but they missed nothing, especially not the trio of nieces arranged around her like vultures waiting for the last twitch. Two of them, Zara and Sloane, were sisters, though you'd never know it from their competing styles of predatory glamour. Zara, in a severe navy blue dress that probably cost more than a car, had her hands clasped in a show of pious grief, her diamond rings catching the dim light. Sloane, younger and brasher, wore a vibrant magenta jumpsuit, a defiant splash of color in the somber room. She kept checking her phone, her perfectly manicured thumb scrolling endlessly. Then there was Amara. She stood slightly apart from the others, near the window, her simple, elegant gray dress a stark contrast to her cousin's calculated opulence. She wasn't a Dubois by name, her mother had been Genevieve's estranged sister, but she was the only one whose sorrow was genuine. Her heart ached with a real, physical pain as she watched the formidable woman who had been more of a mother to her than her own fade away. She had spent weeks here, reading to Genevieve, holding her hand, sharing stories, while her cousins made only fleeting, performative appearances. "Aunt Genevieve," Zara began, her voice a silky, rehearsed purr. "We're here. We love you so much." She squeezed Genevieve's frail hand, a little too tightly. Genevieve's gaze flickered towards her, a spark of the old fire momentarily igniting in their depths. She knew Zara's love was valued at approximately half of a $75 million estate. Sloane, pocketing her phone, chimed in. "We'll take care of everything, Auntie. The house, the charities, your legacy. It will all be safe with us." Her words were a promise, but they sounded like a threat. Genevieve's gaze drifted past them, landing on Amara. She gave a weak, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A silent command. "Don't believe them." Amara's eyes welled with tears, and she gave a slight nod in return. She understood. This wasn't about love or legacy for Zara and Sloane. It was a hostile takeover. And as Genevieve's breaths grew fainter, Amara knew the battle for her soul. And her fortune was only just beginning. Genevieve Dubois passed not with a dramatic final gasp, but with a quiet sigh, as if she were simply releasing the last of her earthly burdens. The moment she was gone, the feigned grief of Zara and Sloane evaporated, replaced by a chillingly practical energy. While Amara sat by the bedside, her hand still holding Genevieve's now cool one, her body trembling with silent sobs, her cousins were already in motion. "I'll call the funeral home," Zara announced, her voice crisp and businesslike. "The one in Queen Anne. They handled the Vanderbilt service. It has to be tasteful." Sloane was already on her laptop at the grand mahogany desk. "I'm drafting an announcement for the Seattle Times. Philanthropist and arts patron Genevieve Dubois. We need to control the narrative, emphasize her generosity. It will make the inheritance transfer look better." Amara stared at them, horrified. They were dissecting a life like a corporate merger. She's just gone," Amara whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. "Can we not just be with her for a moment?" Zara shot her a look of pity mixed with disdain. "Amara, darling, grief is a luxury. We have responsibilities. $75 million worth of them." She turned back to her phone, her tone dropping into a somber, professional register as she made the call. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur of strategic mourning for Zara and Sloane. They orchestrated every detail, from the specific shade of cream for the roses to the guest list for the exclusive wake. They spoke to the press in hushed, reverent tones, painting a picture of two devoted nieces who had been at their beloved aunt's side until the very end. Amara, who had actually been there, was airbrushed from the picture. She was the quiet, mousy cousin from the less respectable side of the family, a footnote in the grand narrative Zara and Sloane were weaving. Amara, for her part, retreated. The penthouse, once a place of warmth and shared stories with Genevieve, now felt cold and alien. Her cousin's whispers and pointed looks made it clear she was an intruder. She found solace in the small things Genevieve had loved: the worn copy of Pride and Prejudice on her nightstand, the small, hidden rooftop garden where she grew jasmine, the faint scent of her favorite Earl Grey tea that still lingered in the air. These were the pieces of the real Genevieve, the woman who had taught her to paint, who had funded her education, who had always made her feel seen. The day of the will reading arrived, a week after the funeral. The mood in the lawyer's downtown Seattle office was electric. Zara and Sloane sat on one side of the polished conference table, dressed in impeccable black, their faces masks of solemn anticipation. Amara sat on the other, alone, feeling small and out of place. She was only here because Genevieve's lawyer, Mr. Alistair Finch, had insisted. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Finch began, a kind-faced man with weary eyes who had served Genevieve for decades. He cleared his throat, opening a thick leather-bound portfolio. Genevieve was very specific in her instructions. She wanted this read to all three of you together. Zara leaned forward slightly, a predator sensing the final move. Sloane tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the table, the rhythmic click the only sound in the room. Amara just wanted it to be over. She expected nothing. Her cousins had made it clear that the entire estate was theirs. She was just a witness to their victory. Mr. Finch put on his reading glasses, and the room held its breath. Mr. Finch looked over the top of his glasses, first at Zara and Sloane, then at Amara, before his eyes settled on the document before him. "I, Genevieve Dubois, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "All of my personal effects, including jewelry and clothing, are to be offered first to my niece, Amara. Whatever she does not wish to keep shall be donated." Zara and Sloane exchanged a look, a silent dismissal. Let the poor cousin have the trinkets. Their focus was on the real prize. Mr. Finch continued, his voice steady. "As to the remainder of my estate, including the penthouse at the Olympian Tower, my portfolio of stocks and bonds, my art collection, and all other assets, tangible and intangible, valued at approximately $75 million. He paused again, and Zara held her breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the arm of her chair. "It is my express directive that all of these assets be liquidated. The entire sum is to be placed in a trust managed by Mr. Alistair Finch to establish the Dubois Foundation for Emerging Artists, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants and studio space to struggling artists within the city of Seattle." The silence that followed was more profound than the one in the penthouse on the day Genevieve died. It was a hollow, ringing void. Amara's eyes widened in shock. She looked from the lawyer to her cousins, her mind struggling to process the words. All of it? To charity? Zara was the first to break. A strangled laugh escaped her lips. That's not funny, Alistair. Where's the real will?" "This is the only will, Zara," Mr. Finch said calmly, not flinching from her venomous glare. Sloane's face had turned a blotchy, furious red, clashing horribly with her magenta jumpsuit. "She wouldn't do that! We were her family! We were her everything!" "She left a final letter," Mr. Finch said, pulling a smaller envelope from the portfolio. He began to read Genevieve's final, cutting words from beyond the grave. "To Zara and Sloane, I saw you. I saw the performative grief, the calculated affection, the endless scrolling on your phones as you waited for me to die. You coveted my wealth, but you never once cherished my heart. You wanted to be the caretakers of my legacy? You weren't even fit to be the caretakers of my memory. My fortune will go to those who, like me, understand that art and passion are the only true inheritance. You shall have nothing." That was the spark that lit the inferno. Nothing? Zara shrieked, rising from her chair so fast it scraped backward. That old woman. After everything we did for her, the parties, the appearances, the lies we told to protect her reputation. We'll contest it, Sloane snarled, her voice trembling with rage. She was senile, delusional. Amara, you'll testify for us. You saw how she was at the end. All eyes turned to Amara. She felt cornered, a mouse between two roaring lions. But the image of Genevieve's tired, knowing eyes flashed in her mind. The silent shake of her head. Don't believe them. No, Amara said, her voice quiet but firm. She knew exactly what she was doing. Zara's face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. You worthless little charity case! This is your fault! You poisoned her against us! She took a step toward Amara, but Mr. Finch stood up, a formidable barrier. That is enough, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The reading is concluded. I suggest you both leave. Zara and Sloane, sputtering with threats of lawsuits and ruin, finally stormed out of the office, leaving a wake of fury behind them. The door slammed shut, and the silence returned, this time feeling like a balm. Amara sagged in her chair, emotionally exhausted. She had survived. It was over. Amara, Mr. Finch said gently, his kind eyes resting on her. Could you please stay for a few more minutes? There is one other matter to discuss. Amara looked at Mr. Finch, her mind still reeling from the explosive confrontation. Another matter? I don't understand. The will was clear. The will was a public statement, Mr. Finch corrected gently, his expression softening. It was Genevieve's final, masterful rebuke to a lifetime of greed. But her final wishes for you were a private affair. He reached back into his leather portfolio and retrieved a different envelope, this one sealed with a wax stamp bearing the Dubois family crest. It was addressed simply to Amara in Genevieve's elegant, looping script. Her heart began to pound, a nervous, fluttering rhythm against her ribs. Genevieve loved you more than you can possibly imagine, Amara, Mr. Finch said, his voice filled with a paternal warmth. She saw in you the same spirit, the same artistic soul, the same integrity she valued above all else. She also carried a great secret, one she felt would burden you if revealed too soon. She asked me to give you this only when the time was right. He slid the envelope across the polished table. Amara's trembling fingers broke the seal. Inside were two documents. The first was a handwritten letter. My dearest Amara, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the public spectacle of my will is complete. I hope it provided some small measure of justice. Now for the truth. The woman you knew as your mother, my sister, was a wonderful person, but she was not your biological mother. She raised you as her own to protect you and to protect me. Amara, my sweet, talented girl, you are my daughter. Amara's breath hitched, the words on the page blurred, the room tilting around her. My daughter. The phrase echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of her mind. It was impossible. And yet, as the initial shock receded, a lifetime of scattered puzzle pieces began to snap into place. The way Genevieve's eyes would light up whenever she entered a room, the private art lessons, the unconditional funding for her education, the shared inside jokes and whispered confidences, the way she always felt more at home in the penthouse with Genevieve than she ever had anywhere else. It wasn't the affection of an aunt. It had been the fierce, secret, unwavering love of a mother. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of a profound, earth-shattering revelation. She looked up at Mr. Finch, her eyes asking the question her lips could not form. He nodded, his own eyes glistening. She wanted to tell you so many times. But your aunt, your adoptive mother, was ill for so long, and Genevieve feared the shock would be too much. Then, as Zara and Sloane grew more grasping, she feared they would see you as a threat. So she created a plan, a fortress to protect you and your inheritance. He gestured to the second document in the envelope. It was a legal instrument, a deed of trust. The will that was read today pertained to the estate of Genevieve Dubois, but 15 years ago, she established a separate, private trust, the Amara Dubois Trust. Over the years, she transferred the vast majority of her liquid assets, her most valuable holdings, into it. The $75 million left to charity was merely what remained in the public estate. The trust, your trust, Amara, is valued at over $300 million. It is all yours. She has left you everything.
If you're enjoying this story, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next episode.
$300 million. The number was an abstraction, a string of zeros that held no meaning. But the word daughter, that was a physical blow, a seismic shock that rearranged the very foundations of her identity. Amara sat in the leather chair, the letter clutched in her hand, the ink a tangible link to a mother she had never truly known she had. The tears that had been a stream were now a silent, steady flood, blurring the opulent office into a watercolor of mahogany and leather. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. All this time, she was my mother, and you were her world, Mr. Finch affirmed, his voice a steady anchor in her sea of confusion. She saw the cruelty of your cousins, long before you did. She knew they would tear you apart if they saw you as a rival. So she played the long game. She built a fortress around you, brick by brick, stock by stock, until you were untouchable. The public will was the final wall of that fortress, a brilliant piece of misdirection to draw their fire while you secured your birthright. He explained the structure of the trust. It was ironclad, designed by the sharpest legal minds to be impenetrable. Genevieve had spent years meticulously crafting it, ensuring there were no loopholes, no weaknesses her other nieces could exploit. Amara was the sole beneficiary, and her control over it was absolute. That evening, Amara returned to the penthouse. The staff, who had been informed by Mr. Finch of the true succession, now greeted her with a new deference. "Welcome home, Miss Dubois," the head housekeeper said, her voice filled with a warmth Amara had never heard before. The name sent another shiver through her. Miss Dubois. It was her name, her real name. She walked through the rooms, each step an act of rediscovery. This wasn't just her aunt's home, it was her mother's. This was her home. She ran her hand along the spines of the books in the library, picturing Genevieve reading them to her as a child. She stood before a stunning, expansive painting of the Puget Sound at sunset, a piece she had always admired, but now saw with new eyes. A small plaque at the bottom read, "Amara's View." It had been commissioned for her. Every corner of the penthouse held a secret message of love she was only now beginning to decipher. Her grief was a strange, new shape. She mourned Genevieve, the aunt, but she also mourned the mother she never got to have. The years of open affection that had been stolen by circumstance and secrecy. Yet, beneath the grief, a new feeling was taking root, a fierce, protective resolve. Genevieve hadn't just left her a fortune, she had left her a mission. To protect her legacy, to live a life of purpose, and to never, ever let the vultures win. Her resolve was tested sooner than she expected. The next morning, as she was having coffee and looking out at the bay, her phone buzzed with a notification. A friend had sent her a link to a news article. The headline was a punch to the gut. Dubois Harris's to contest will. Allege undue influence and elder abuse by charity case cousin. The article was filled with quotes from Zara and Sloane, painting Amara as a cunning manipulator who had preyed on a senile old woman, isolating her from her true family to steal her fortune. They had fired the first shot in a war she didn't want, but one she knew she had to win. The words on the screen were a venomous cocktail of lies and half-truths, expertly spun to paint Amara as a villain. Her first instinct was to hide. to retreat back into the quiet, unassuming life she had always known. The penthouse, which had felt like a sanctuary just hours before, now felt like a glass cage, with the entire world peering in, judging her. But then, the image of Genevieve's face, fierce and defiant even in her final days, flooded her mind. Hiding was not an option. This was a battle for her mother's honor as much as her own. She immediately called Mr. Finch. "You saw the article," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. There was no question in her statement. "I did," he replied, his tone grim. "It's a classic smear campaign. They're trying to poison the well, to pressure you into a settlement by threatening a long, ugly public fight. They are assuming you are still the same timid girl they always pushed around." "They're assuming I'm poor," Amara corrected, a new, cold clarity cutting through her anger. "They think I can't afford to fight back. They think I'll be scared into giving them a piece of the charity money to make them go away." "Precisely," Mr. Finch confirmed. "And what do you want to do, Amara?" This was the real question. It wasn't just a legal decision. It was a declaration of who she was going to be. Was she the frightened orphan? Or was she Genevieve Dubois' daughter? "I want to fight," she said, the words tasting like liberation. "But not on their terms. I won't get into a mudslinging match in the tabloids. My mother was a woman of elegance and strategy. I want to respond like her daughter." A slow smile spread across Mr. Finch's face, audible even over the phone. "I was hoping you would say that. Genevieve built a fortress, Amara. It's time to show them the cannons." His plan was simple and devastatingly effective. They would not issue a counterstatement filled with denials. Instead, they would take control of the narrative in a way Zara and Sloane could never anticipate. The first step was to fully and publicly embrace the Dubois Foundation for Emerging Artists. Amara, as the newly revealed executor of her mother's philanthropic vision, would host a press conference. Not to talk about the will, but to announce the foundation's first major initiative. "We will not be responding to the baseless and hurtful allegations from my cousins," Amara stated 2 days later, standing at a podium in the Seattle Art Museum, a place Genevieve had endowed for decades. She was dressed in a stunning deep blue suit, a color of power and confidence, her mother's favorite sapphire earrings, her only jewelry. She looked directly into the cameras, her voice clear and unwavering. "My focus, like my mother's, is on the future. It is on the artists who make this city vibrant. That is why I am here today, to announce the Genevieve Dubois Legacy Prize, a $1 million annual grant to be awarded to a visionary artist who is changing the landscape of Pacific Northwest art." The room erupted in a flurry of camera flashes and excited murmurs. She had changed the conversation completely. She wasn't a greedy niece. She was a philanthropist, a patron of the arts, the dignified guardian of her mother's true legacy. She had taken their ugliest accusations and rendered them irrelevant. In the back of the room, Amara could almost feel Genevieve's proud, approving smile. Amara's philanthropic masterstroke dominated the Seattle social pages for days, pushing her cousin's bitter accusations to the gossip blog fringes where they belonged. The narrative had been reset. Amara was the dignified heir to a cultural legacy, while Zara and Sloane were petty, grasping relatives. But as Mr. Finch had warned, they were not going to retreat quietly. A week after the press conference, a courier delivered the inevitable summons. Zara and Sloane had officially filed a lawsuit to contest Genevieve's will, petitioning the court to have it nullified on the grounds of diminished mental capacity and undue influence. Staring at the legal jargon, Amara felt a chill of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resolve. This was the next stage of the war, the one that would be fought not in headlines, but in depositions and courtrooms. She met with Mr. Finch in his office, the same room where her life had been irrevocably changed. "Let them," Mr. Finch said, after reviewing the documents with a calm, almost bored expression. Their entire case is built on the fantasy that your mother was a doddering fool and you are a master manipulator. We have something they don't, the truth. And more importantly, we have proof. He gestured to a locked cabinet behind his desk. Genevieve was a brilliant strategist. For the last 2 years of her life, after every single visit from Zara and Sloan, she recorded a video diary. She would detail their conversations, their thinly veiled questions about her assets, their performative affection. She also had monthly cognitive evaluations from 3 different highly respected neurologists, all of whom will testify that she was sharper than most people half her age until the very end. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a warrior's light. They think they're dragging you into a swamp. In reality, they've just walked into a perfectly set trap. We will let them spend their money, make their accusations, and build their castle of lies. And then, at the right moment, we will dismantle it, piece by piece, in front of a judge. The first step was the deposition. Zara and Sloane's lawyers wanted to question Amara under oath, hoping to catch her in a lie, to paint her as an unreliable and manipulative witness. They imagined she would be the same timid, easily intimidated girl they had always known. Amara walked into the deposition room feeling not like a victim, but like a general. She had spent the preceding days with Mr. Finch, not just preparing her testimony, but studying her mother's journals, watching her video diaries. She was absorbing Genevieve's strength, her intellect, her intolerance for fools. She wore a simple but impeccably tailored cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back elegantly. She was the very picture of quiet confidence. The opposing lawyer, a shark in a $1,000 suit, began with patronizing gentleness. "Miss Collins," he began, intentionally using her old name, "this must be very difficult for you. Tell us about your relationship with the deceased." "My relationship with my aunt was one of deep love and mutual respect," Amara replied, her voice even and clear. "She was my mentor and my dearest friend." For hours, he poked and prodded. He twisted her words, trying to make her acts of kindness, reading to Genevieve, bringing her tea, simply being present, seem like a calculated campaign of influence. Amara never wavered. She answered every question with unassailable simplicity and grace. The lawyer, growing frustrated, decided to go for the kill. "Isn't it true, Miss Collins, that you were deeply in debt before your aunt's death? That you were desperate for money and saw a wealthy old woman as your ticket out?" Amara met his gaze without blinking. "My financial situation is and was my own private matter. But I will say this, my love for my aunt was never transactional. Unlike others, I never once looked at her and saw a dollar sign. I saw a remarkable woman who deserved peace and dignity in her final days. Can your client say the same?" The question hung in the air, a perfect, unanswerable accusation. The lawyer, for the first time, was speechless. Zara and Sloan, watching from across the table, looked apoplectic. The timid mouse had just roared, and they were beginning to understand how badly they had misjudged her. Amara's flawless deposition sent a shockwave through her cousin's legal strategy. The narrative of a timid, easily manipulated girl was shattered, replaced by the reality of a poised, intelligent woman who was more than their match. Their lawyer, humbled and furious, warned them that their case was far weaker than they believed. Desperation began to curdle Zara and Sloane's greed into something far uglier and more reckless. If they couldn't break Amara in the courtroom, they would try to break her in the real world. The subtle media smear campaign escalated into a full-blown assault. Tabloid reporters began following Amara, shouting questions at her as she left the penthouse. Anonymous sources close to the family began leaking fabricated stories to gossip sites. Tales of Amara having a gambling problem, of her being fired from previous jobs for theft, of her having a string of wealthy older lovers. It was a character assassination of the highest order, designed to isolate her and make her toxic in the elite circles she was now supposed to inhabit. One evening, Amara was leaving a dinner with the board of the Seattle Art Museum when a reporter ambushed her, shoving a microphone in her face. "Miss Dubois, is it true you were evicted from 3 apartments for non-payment of rent before your aunt's death?" The flash of the camera was blinding. Her security guard quickly hustled her into the car, but the damage was done. The headline was already written. She arrived back at the penthouse, her hands trembling with rage. She felt violated, exposed. It was one thing to face them in a sterile legal setting. It was another to have her life twisted and slandered for public consumption. She found herself staring at a portrait of Genevieve, a magnificent oil painting that captured her fierce, unyielding spirit. "What do I do?" she whispered to the painting. "How do I fight this?" And as if in answer, she remembered one of Genevieve's favorite sayings: "Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it." She called Mr. Finch. "They're trying to drag me into the mud," she said, her voice a low, angry hum. "I won't do it. We need to end this. It's time to stop playing defense." "I agree," Mr. Finch said. "Their desperation is making them sloppy. They're creating a clear pattern of harassment. It's time to accelerate our timeline. It's time to show them the videos." Their strategy shifted. Instead of waiting for the official court date months away, Mr. Finch filed a motion for a summary judgment, arguing that the plaintiff's case was so baseless and frivolous that it should be dismissed outright. To support the motion, he submitted a single, devastating piece of evidence: a 5-minute compilation reel of Genevieve's video diaries. The video was a masterpiece of self-aware testimony. It showed Genevieve, lucid and sharp, speaking directly to the camera on various dates. "Zara visited today," she'd say in one clip. "She spent 10 minutes telling me how much she loved my pearl necklace, and 45 minutes asking my financial manager about market volatility. Her priorities are, as always, crystal clear." Another clip showed her after a visit from Sloan. Sloan's latest venture is a wellness brand. She needs $1 million investment. She promised to name a green juice after me. How touching. The final clip was the most damning. It was from the week before her death. "Alistair," she said, her voice weak but her eyes blazing, "if you are showing this, it means the girls have behaved exactly as I predicted. Let it be known that my mind is my own, my choices are my own, and my fortune will be disposed of according to my will, not their greed." The motion was filed. The trap was sprung. The countdown to detonation had begun. The motion for summary judgment forced Zara and Sloan into a corner. Their only hope was to discredit the video evidence before a judge. The hearing was set, and the courtroom was a hushed theater of anticipation. Zara and Sloan sat with their lawyer, whispering furiously, their faces tight with anxiety. They had built their entire public image on a foundation of sophisticated glamour. Now they were reduced to petty litigants in a public court. Amara sat beside Mr. Finch, a portrait of calm serenity. Her victory was already won, not in the legal sense, but in the personal one. She was no longer afraid of them. She was no longer the poor, overlooked cousin. She was Genevieve Dubois' daughter, and she was there to defend her mother's final, brilliant act. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Carol Diaz, called the court to order. "I have reviewed the motion for summary judgment and the submitted evidence. I will now view the video evidence in question." The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly, and the large screen flickered to life. Genevieve's face, sharp and intelligent, filled the screen. The compilation began. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Genevieve, with devastating wit and precision, narrated her niece's greed. The clip of Zara inquiring about the pearl necklace, and then the market volatility, drew audible gasps. The clip of Sloane's tone-deaf pitch for her wellness brand caused a few people in the back to stifle laughter. Zara and Sloane sank lower in their chairs, their faces burning with humiliation. This was worse than a legal defeat. It was a social execution. Their carefully constructed facades were being stripped away, layer by layer, by the very woman they had dismissed as a senile fool. Their lawyer sat stone-faced, knowing his case had just evaporated. The final clip played Genevieve's direct, fiery address to Alistair, her final testament to her own sound mind. When the screen went black and the lights came up, the silence in the room was absolute. Judge Diaz looked down from the bench, her expression unreadable. She removed her glasses and looked directly at Zara and Sloane. "In my 20 years on the bench," she began, her voice a low, dangerous weapon, "I have seen my share of frivolous lawsuits. But this is a masterclass in avarice and disrespect. You have not only wasted this court's time, but you have attempted to defame the memory of a woman who, by all accounts, was a pillar of this community. You have harassed and slandered your cousin, a woman who, by her actions, has shown more grace and dignity than you could possibly comprehend." She paused, letting the words land like hammer blows. "The motion for summary judgment is granted. This case is dismissed with prejudice, and I am furthermore ordering the plaintiffs, Miss Zara Dubois and Miss Sloane Dubois, to pay all of Miss Amara Dubois' legal fees. This court will not be used as a tool for extortion." It was over. A gavel cracked like a gunshot, sealing their fate. Zara let out a choked sob of pure fury and shame. Sloane simply stared ahead, her face a blank mask of defeat. They had lost everything. Not just the money, but their reputation, their standing, their very identity as the glamorous Dubois heiresses. They were nothing more than common, greedy failures, exposed for the entire city to see. As they scurried out of the courtroom, avoiding the eyes of the reporters they had once courted, Amara felt not a sense of triumph, but a quiet, profound sense of peace. Justice, like an inheritance, had finally been delivered. Months after the court case, the name Dubois in Seattle was no longer associated with the scandal of two grasping nieces, but with the quiet power of a new philanthropic force. Amara, now universally known as Amara Dubois, had stepped into her role with a grace and vision that silenced all remaining whispers. The penthouse was no longer a fortress, but a vibrant hub of creativity. She hosted salons for the artists supported by the Dubois Foundation, filling the rooms with the music, laughter, and intellectual debate her mother had so loved. She had claimed her mother's personal effects, not as trophies, but as cherished connections to her past. She wore Genevieve's favorite cashmere shawl when she read in the library. She placed a single jasmine from the rooftop garden on her desk each morning. And she kept the letter, the one that had revealed her true identity, in a small, carved wooden box on her bedside table. It was a reminder not of the fortune she had inherited, but of the love that had secretly guided her entire life. One crisp autumn afternoon, Amara stood in the newly opened Dubois Foundation for Emerging Artists, a state-of-the-art facility in a renovated historic building downtown. The main gallery was filled with the bold, challenging work of the first-ever winner of the Genevieve Dubois Legacy Prize. The artist, a young woman from a background not unlike Amara's own, was speaking to a crowd of patrons and journalists, her voice filled with a hope and gratitude that was palpable. Mr. Finch stood beside Amara, a proud smile on his face. "She would have loved this," he said quietly. "She would have loved you." Amara's eyes welled with tears, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She thought of Zara and Sloane, who had reportedly left the country in disgrace, their social lives in tatters. She felt a brief, fleeting pang of pity for them, not for the money they had lost, but for the love they had never understood. They had spent their lives chasing a number in a bank account, while the real treasure had been right in front of them all along. Her mother had left her more than a fortune. She had left her a purpose. She had given her a new name, a new past, and a new future. The inheritance wasn't the $300 million in the trust. That was just the tool. The true inheritance was the strength to fight for what was right, the wisdom to see beyond the glitter of wealth, and the capacity to build a legacy rooted not in greed, but in love, art, and the enduring power of a mother's secret, unwavering devotion. As the applause for the young artist filled the gallery, Amara Dubois, daughter and heir, finally felt like she was home.
Before you go, tap that like button, leave a comment to let us know what you think, and subscribe so you're always the first to hear our next story. Your support keeps these stories coming.